When the dust had settled on The Phantom Menace, it was surely one of the most debated blockbusters of all time. In strictly box office terms, the film was a resounding success, grossing nearly $1 billion worldwide, which speaks to the repeat business and an overwhelming appetite for the resurrected franchise. But it had certainly disturbed the force, dividing moviegoers and critics in a significant way, presumably ruining friendships and families in the process. Okay, perhaps that's a bit of an exaggeration, but make no mistake, it was a wild time to be a Star Wars fan in the wake of Episode 1. So many message boards and AOL chat rooms were littered with arguments over the film's pros and cons, and while it would often seem as though the naysayers were in the majority, there was no doubt the film had its ardent defenders who gave the film the benefit of the doubt, siding with George Lucas's point of view that The Phantom Menace was merely a table setter for darker things to come, and its juvenile atmosphere was warranted considering it was, first and foremost, a children's film. Obviously, this is a debate that rages on even today.
Are you an angel? What?
So unnecessary.
Regardless of which side of the aisle you fell on, everyone could agree that Episode 2 was still a must-see. It might even make or break the prequel trilogy for some, and those of us who resented the silliness of Phantom Menace were grasping to the idea that it would wipe the slate clean and act as a true Star Wars adventure. Crucially, it would give the series a second chance to introduce young Anakin Skywalker, who was less than an impressive figure in the first chapter, and even the movie's fans could agree on that point. Sure, it was subtitled Attack of the Clones, which didn't exactly add much hope.
Oh, what was it? What was it? Was it?
Attack of the Clones.
Is that real?
Yes. What do you think about that?
I don't know about that.
But hell, if it was a drastic improvement on the first one, they could call it whatever they wanted. So in May 2002, Lucasfilm debuted the second prequel film to a breathless world curious to see if we were going to be getting more of the same, or this trilogy's version of Empire Strikes Back.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
First, good news. Attack of the Clones is a better movie than Phantom Menace, if ever so slightly. But its pleasures are still few and far between. It shows us more alien worlds, has a more adventurous spirit, it raises the stakes dramatically, and does a decent job gradually exposing the darkness lurking inside Anakin. Furthermore, it has an excellent score by John Williams, it has some engaging aliens and creatures, and best of all, gives us the Obi-Wan we've been waiting for thanks to a terrific Ewan McGregor,
Not good.
who is pitch perfect this time around.
We will find out who's trying to kill you, Padme. I promise you.
We will not exceed our mandate, my young Padawan learner.
Finally, there's precious little Jar Jar Binks, or the dreadful Trade Federation, who are laughable excuses for villains in Episode 1. It is more or less a considerably livelier affair than its predecessor, which is important because another movie with such a tedious pace would be a crusher. The plot is still heavy on political machinations and devious plots to undermine the Republic, but it's not so staggeringly monotonous as Phantom Menace.
Thank the Maker.
But Attack of the Clones carries over many of the same issues that plagued Phantom Menace. It's certainly busy throwing stuff at the screen, though it will never be mistaken for exhilarating or thrilling. The sense that we're not watching anything real looms over the entire film because, though some of the CGI is effective, there's hardly a scene that goes by that doesn't look exactly like it's the product of a computer. Actors are often stiff as they stand around awkwardly, usually murmuring plot points to each other in dire tones. You can almost picture the green screen behind them, a blank wall leading to blank stares. Once again, the dialogue is joyless and mechanical.
I've thought about her every day since we've parted, and she's forgotten me completely.
Lucas and co-writer Jonathan Hales deploy so much exposition in every scene that there's no real room for wit or genuine humanity left for the actors. While it's unfair to constantly compare the prequels to the original trilogy, it's impossible not to wonder what happened to the playful personality those films exhibited. Maybe it's the product of not having a rogue like Han Solo in the mix to bring some scoundrelly attitude.
I love you.
I know.
But more than that, it's the feeling that what we're watching is a formality, as if Lucas just had to make these movies, even if his heart wasn't quite in it. As was the case with Episode 1, most everyone in the cast looks as if they're having some difficulty rising to the occasion while delivering their lines.
You're a slave? I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
Only Ewan McGregor, Palpatine himself, Ian McDiarmid, and later in the film, a charismatic Christopher Lee are able to bring some real personality to the forefront, despite the odds against them. You must hand it to Ewan, he's a terrific Obi-Wan. It's one of the few things that the prequels as fans and detractors can agree upon. Often the lone shining light in the sea of ho-hum CGI and disinterested co-stars, McGregor is pretty much the best thing about Attack of the Clones, proving that a true movie star can rise above even the most banal material. He plays the role with self-assurance and even a little smirk here and there, injecting a sense of much-needed confidence into the veins of a movie that's quite lacking in the coolness department.
She went into the club, Master. Sorry, Master. Yes, Master. I try, Master. Master.
Hayden Christensen, in his first outing as Anakin, is not in the same conversation. And while we're not going to flog him over and over and over as it's been done to death by plenty of others, it's impossible to ignore that George Lucas has now miscast Anakin Skywalker 2 times in a row. That would be impressive if it weren't so infuriating. Jake Lloyd we can forgive because he was so young and the character was on the sidelines for a large chunk of the running time, but Christensen is a bigger problem as Anakin is front and center in Episode 2, and the movie demands he make a serious impression. He does all right, but it's not a positive one. I'm well aware that Hayden has his defenders, and maybe that's because his performance did improve in Episode 3, but in Attack of the Clones, he's a detriment, not a standout. But this gets to a larger issue with the first 2 prequels, which is how Lucas himself views Anakin. Setting aside the performances of Lloyd and Christensen, what do we see when we watch him? Well, he's a young man who's brash, reckless, and often angry. He's also snotty, petulant, and whiny. Now, that may describe many a young man, but why does it have to describe this young man? His immaturity makes him more vulnerable to the dark side and the manipulations of Palpatine, of course, but Lucas could have approached Anakin's emotional weakness in a variety of ways that made sense while maintaining an aura of mystery and danger about him. Instead, we get a character who alternates between mopey dork and excitable diva.
I hate them!
In that regard, Lucas must be getting the performance he wants from Christensen, who gives us the future Darth Vader as grumpy male model. Revisiting the performance all these years later, it hasn't aged well or revealed layers that weren't perceptible back in 2002. We were all rooting for this unknown to bring an added dimension to Skywalker that was clearly missing in Phantom Menace, but like Lloyd before him, Hayden flounders mightily in this world. People might argue that Luke himself was petulant and whiny in the first Star Wars, but Luke was a nobody, going nowhere, stuck in a barren wasteland with nothing good on the horizon. You can't blame him for being a bit of a brat. Anakin is a powerful sorcerer with ambitions of being the greatest Jedi the galaxy has ever seen. Act like a grown-up, my man. The relationship between Anakin and Padme is supposed to be the beating heart of this movie. If we don't believe Anakin will do absolutely anything for her, we won't buy his eventual desperate turn to the dark side. Unfortunately, this heart doesn't have any blood in it. The scenes between the couple have all the flavor of a cardboard box. The 2 actors have zero chemistry, and though Natalie Portman gives a decent enough showing, Christensen struggles to bring sympathetic life to Anakin's tortured puppy love. You watch them together and can't help but think she could do a lot better than this guy. If he weren't a supremely powerful Jedi, he'd be waiting tables at a cantina. Their conversations are now infamous for how strained and passionless they are.
From the moment I met you, not a day has gone by when I haven't thought of you.
Yes, we all remember Anakin's utterly ridiculous thoughts on sand and how it is so not like Padme, but there are plenty of scenes where the cringes are undeniable.
Please don't look at me like that.
The only help these two get comes courtesy of John Williams, with a terrific effort here. Indeed, his love theme, Across the Stars, for Anakin and Padme is the very best thing about that romance. It's lovely and melancholy and beautifully hints at the doom lurking just around the corner. It's actually one of the best themes in the Star Wars universe. One thing Attack of the Clones has going for it is action. Uninspired action with now dated CGI, sure, but action nonetheless. The main reason Clones is more palatable than Phantom Menace is that it's not nearly as boring. Now, there's nothing so memorable as the pod race or Duel of the Fates in Clones, but at least the picture moves, it doesn't just sit there. The speeder chase that weaves through the skyscrapers of Coruscant is an entertaining spectacle, and the mayhem at the Colosseum in the third act is engaging enough, if not very memorable. At the very least, it's a unique setting for the franchise and provides us with a few eye-popping beasties. But I, for one, did not sign up for the Yoda versus Dooku fight, which was praised as being kick-ass when the film first came out, but has undergone something of a reevaluation in recent years. Simply put, Yoda and Christopher Lee bouncing around looks more goofy than anything else, and the overall dust-up between Dooku and the three Jedi doesn't nearly pack the same primal punch as the saber battle in Phantom Menace. As mentioned, Christopher Lee brings some class to the proceedings as Dooku, who is basically the movie's main villain, even if he doesn't show up until the third act. 2 movies in, and we have a major villain problem, as these movies don't really have any. Before Dooku, we get some fan service in the form of Jango Fett, who might briefly entice fans with his very presence, but never comes across as a legitimate threat. In the original trilogy, there was always the specter of Vader, nipping at the rebels' heels every step of the way, a truly imposing antagonist that we needed to see defeated. At this point, the prequels have not given us anything or anyone to really fear. There's just the knowledge that Palpatine will eventually overthrow the Republic and wipe out the Jedi. Our heroes never seem to be in any grave danger that they can't get out of. There's no rebellious spirit to be found, no genuine darkness threatening to blot out the light. Turns out, this wasn't the Empire Strikes Back of the trilogy, after all. When Attack of the Clones came out, it was a dispiriting experience for those of us who feared the worst, who hoped against hope that Phantom Menace was an improbable accident. With this entry, it became clear George Lucas had already made his bed, and the prequels were going to be far, far away from the Star Wars movies most of us cherished for years. Naturally, as time has moved on and new generations have grown up with the prequels, these films now have fans who weren't around for the initial reception and who see attributes some of us can't. That's not a bad thing. After all, we don't pretend to speak for everyone. Star Wars movies are meant to move us, inspire us, and ignite fires within our imaginations. Take us to places we've never been before, places we can't wait to return to. And if Attack of the Clones hits those notes for you, may the Force be with you. There's still one more to go, the finale. Will it be the Redeemer, the one that turns things around for good? Or will it be the final straw to break this bantha's back?
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
So, we've come to the end of the line. It's 2005, and it's hard to believe 6 years have gone by since The Phantom Menace was unleashed upon the world, a film that can comfortably be referred to as one of the most debated blockbusters of all time. 3 years after, we made the acquaintance of the Gungans and Little Annie. Attack of the Clones came around to either turn things around completely or confirm our worst fears. That the new Star Wars movies were from a different galaxy altogether than the movies many of us grew up with. Clones may have relieved some of the general audience's concerns, but for many it indeed seemed to indicate that, sadly, the prequel trilogy was simply not on the same level as the beloved original trilogy. Too much focus on middling CGI. Another tepid presentation of Anakin Skywalker, exhaustingly goofy humor, and some truly boring dialogue to go along with a bevy of uninspiring performances. Suddenly, waiting 3 years for another Star Wars movie didn't seem like that big of a deal. But what were we gonna do? Skip out on it entirely? Of course not, because this was bringing us the moment we've been waiting for. Anakin Skywalker's final turn to the dark side. The true birth of Darth Vader and the end of the Jedi Order. While the first two movies were disappointments, well, for plenty of us anyways, we still had to see it through to the end. If Attack of the Clones was an improvement, however slight, on Phantom Menace, then it would make sense for Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, to be the best in the new trilogy. For what that was worth anyway. But the good news for everyone is that Revenge of the Sith is absolutely the best of the prequels. Compared to the first two, this one has it all. Decent visual effects, some solid action sequences, a handful of compelling lightsaber duels, an actual villain worth rooting against, and most crucially, a tolerable performance from Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker. Revenge of the Sith, how you spoil us. Although, let's not rush to crown this movie as some kind of massive accomplishment, even if it looks like The Empire Strikes Back when weighed alongside the first two. Problems the other prequels had, this one does as well, including some very stale dialogue, depressingly chemistry-free romance between Anakin and Padme, and digital backgrounds that never feel real, to list a few. This is a movie that throws a lot of razzle-dazzle at the screen in an effort to knock our socks off in a way the prior two films failed to do. You get the sense that George Lucas is very aware that he has to stick the landing, and, at least in a handful of ways, he does. But Revenge of the Sith mainly gets points by virtue of the fact that we're no longer bogged down by the utter boredom and frustration that Phantom Menace and Clones put us through. In those terms, Sith is an entertaining, sometimes even dramatically satisfying picture. And there is a darkness in the film that's fitting for the story it's telling. On that level, it's thankfully light years away from the silly shenanigans we associate with the first two. That's not to say the film is humorless, and some of that adolescent comedy is on display in the film's first act, mostly thanks to the battle droids and R2-D2. Tellingly, there's very little C-3PO in the film and next to no Jar Jar. Improvements all around. What humor there is usually comes courtesy of sly, sardonic Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we'll get to him in a minute. Revenge of the Sith signals it's learned somewhat from the mistakes of the past by thrusting us into the action right off the bat. Hardly any politicking at all. Can you believe it? Anakin and Obi-Wan have to rescue Chancellor Palpatine from the Separatist army and its leader, the newly introduced General Grievous, in what is clearly a staged kidnapping, but never mind that. The rescue attempt features some fun action and impressive visual effects, as well as the all-too-brief return of Christopher Lee's Count Dooku, who is one of the bright spots in Attack of the Clones, but here has his screen time and head cut off pretty quickly. By tossing us right into the fire, Lucas is obviously trying to give us the goods early on, having heard the complaints that the prior two prequels get off to woefully boring starts. Besides, there's a lot to get to in this film, so he's going to pack the screen with as much space operatics as he can. Of course, we're soon enough reminded of one of the series' main weaknesses, the relationship between Anakin and Padme. The stakes are raised here. Padme is pregnant with you-know-who, and Anakin's about to go through a roller coaster ride of fear, paranoia, and resentment. If we cared about these characters more, their journey to an inevitably tragic breakup would make for compelling cinema, but Lucas once again writes them in strictly one-dimensional terms, their romance no more convincing than the fake environments they often inhabit. While this is Natalie Portman's best take on Padme in all three films, she's still left with little to say or do. Hayden Christensen's performance is better here than it was in Clones, possibly because the many trials he goes through are by their very nature more interesting. Anakin is still prone to fits of whining and moping, but that is who he is, and there's just no changing that. But he does cut a somewhat imposing figure throughout the film, especially toward the end where his face is often a mask of tortured anger and regret. The Anakin presented in the prequels will never be mistaken for a great character, and that's understating the matter, but at least Hayden redeems himself and Anakin ever so slightly by giving a performance here that's at best not an impediment to the movie. Faint praise, but you gotta give him something. Continuing to be a strong presence is Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, and while he proved he was the right man for the job in Episode 2, here he's fully taken the mantle and made the character his own. McGregor instills more humanity into the movie than anyone else by far, and despite all the whiz-bang CGI going on the screen, only truly lights up when he's in frame. The prequels would have been an even bigger mixed bag had they not nailed the casting of Obi-Wan, but thankfully they did, and when all is said and done, Ewan can be proud of the work he did on them. And we finally get a formidable villain in this trilogy. No, not General Grievous, who is impressively presented but not especially effective. That would be Chancellor Palpatine, who finally gets to go full Emperor in the third act. Yes, they call him Darth Sidious here, but he's always been the Emperor to me. It has, of course, been no secret that Palpatine has been pulling all the strings leading up to the events in Episode 3, but actor Ian McDiarmid has had to play it relatively cool throughout, smirking at the audience because we all know the obvious, while poor, overly emotional Anakin remains clueless. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine gets to do his smug patronizing for a while until the third act when he's fully transformed into the maniacal evil Sith Lord who has been lurking in the shadows all along. McDiarmid is once again a real treat to watch. The pro has known all along how to play this charlatan, and it's a satisfying moment when he's turned into the wrinkly, demonic figure we all know and hate. Add to that, the scene effectively culminates in Anakin betraying Mace Windu and accepting his sad fate, which is to be a powerful henchman for the galaxy's most despicable bad guy. This is all prelude to the best sequence in the entire prequel trilogy, the hellish duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin on the lava-filled planet of Mustafar. Is it any surprise that Steven Spielberg evidently helped design some of the sequence during the pre-production, making it as engrossing and cinematic as anything else in the prequels? An event a long time coming. The desperate and chaotic fight actually feels quite monumental regardless of how you felt about the prequels up until this point. There was always a fascination regarding how Darth Vader turned into the monster behind the mask, at least in physical sense, and here we have the ghoulish answer. Anakin dismembered and burnt to a crisp while his old friend looks on in pain is some pretty rough stuff, and those of us who've yearned for the prequels to bring us some serious drama,
You were my brother, Anakin!
finally get it.
I loved you!
As a bonus, the sequence begins with Anakin killing off Newt Gunray and the rest of the Trade Federation. It's a real cherry on top to see the worst characters in the trilogy finally cut to pieces. Another contender for prequels MVP is, of course, John Williams, whose score for Sith is filled with notes of somber doom and heartbreak. His track for the final skirmish Battle of the Heroes is a gem and just as haunting as Duel of the Fates. Though his score for Phantom Menace is far from one of his best, his work on Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is primo John Williams, and as such, the music elevates scenes which might otherwise suffer without his assistance. The entire third act is a compelling one with a series of dark twists and enough grim imagery to surprise even the most devoted prequel hater. Having Anakin slaughter a group of younglings, even if off-screen, is rather brutal and fully cements the character as being irredeemable, for the time being anyhow.
Execute Order 66.
The entire Order 66 sequence in which members of the Jedi are purged by the treacherous clone army is a striking one, but one can't help but think it would carry even more weight if we knew these characters better. We recognize them because they're often hanging around Yoda and Mace Windu, but they don't especially mean anything to us, so what could have been a really startling scene doesn't quite pack the punch it needs. Let's face it, we know the names of guys like Watto and Boss Nass, but most of us couldn't tell you the names of these fallen Jedi if we were paid to. One personal gripe here is, once again, fighting flipping flying Yoda, who just doesn't work on the level they're going for. He didn't look cool bouncing around in Attack of the Clones, he doesn't look cool doing it here, but there are enough Star Wars fans out there who dig it, that I can appreciate, and I might be in the minority, at least the vocal minority. Still, setting a majority of the fight between Yoda and Palpatine in the Senate proves to be a solid idea visually as we watch the figurative and literal demolishing of the Senate by the monstrous villain. Also, remember how much agonizing time we spent in that place during this trilogy? Good riddance. What Revenge of the Sith does relatively well is perform as the third act of a larger story, not unlike how Return of the Jedi contains one busy scene after another. Sith concludes the new trilogy with some necessary bravado, only intermittently breaking up the action with wooden interactions between protagonists. It's far from perfect. It's probably not what we had in mind when we dreamt about the promises of the trilogy when it was first officially announced, but it closes out the prequels with an appropriate amount of spectacle and melancholy. As the book closes on this revisit, it's fascinating to reckon with the prequel trilogy as a whole. The things that often stand out, at least for this writer, are usually negative. Jar Jar's antics, Anakin's sulking, several tedious confrontations, and lack of genuine drama and excitement, well, at least until the very end. But for someone who does not consider themselves a fan, good things can be found within it too. The music, in some of the performances, in the neat details of some of the alien creatures and their worlds. There's no changing what the prequels are, for better or worse. So those of us who initially felt betrayed by the films have no choice but to believe there's still good in them and to keep seeking that out. If it worked for the Skywalkers, maybe it can work for us too.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.